You're tired, and it's not just physical, it's deeper than that. It's the kind of tired that lives in your chest, in your jaw, in the way your thoughts never really stop. You wake up with it. You carry it through conversations. You try to push through it, hide it, explain it away. But the truth is, you've been running on tension for so long, you've started calling it normal. And maybe no one sees it, because you're still functioning. You're still holding it all together. But inside, you're stretched thin, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Not because you're broken, but because you won't let go. You keep holding everything. The pressure, the past, the version of yourself you think people expect to see. You're holding responsibility that doesn't belong to you. You're carrying expectations that no one actually said out loud, but you still feel them pressing against your chest. You're managing the emotions of everyone around you while ignoring your own. And even when you sit down to rest, you're not really resting. You're thinking, planning, rehearsing. Your body is still in protection mode. Your mind is still scanning. Because somewhere deep inside, you've convinced yourself, if I let go, everything will fall apart. But what if that's the lie keeping you tired? What if letting go isn't the collapse you've been avoiding? What if it's the only way back to yourself? The hardest part about letting go is that no one really teaches you how. You hear it all the time. Just let it go. Release what no longer serves you. But what does that even mean when you've built your entire identity around holding it together? When letting go feels like failure, when surrender feels like weakness, when you don't even know who you are, without the struggle, without the pushing, without the pressure. So you keep gripping, not because you want to suffer, but because letting go feels like handing the wheel to chaos. Like saying, I'm not in control anymore, and risking it all crumbling. But the truth is, it's already crumbling, inside you, quietly, because control isn't the foundation you think it is. It's tension disguised as strength, and the longer you hold it, the more it hardens into burnout, disconnection, and silence. The kind of silence where your body is still, but your mind won't let you rest. And what's even heavier, you're not just holding your own pain. You're holding their emotions, their expectations, their disappointments, their chaos. You're holding on to memories you haven't made peace with. You're holding timelines that didn't happen. You're holding versions of yourself that no longer fit, but you're scared to let die. And the scariest part is, you've gotten used to it. The weight, the hyper-awareness, the exhaustion. You've normalized a level of internal strain that was never meant to be permanent. But here's the thing, letting go doesn't mean disappearing. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop clenching around things you were never meant to carry alone. It means you stop managing emotions like they're fires you need to put out. It means you stop performing calm when what you really need is release. And that release won't come through more control. It comes through permission dash. The permission to stop holding everything all the time. The permission to feel tired without apologizing. The permission to be soft without being seen as weak. The permission to say, I can't keep doing this to myself. Because the truth is, you were never meant to. And when you finally do, even just a little, something shifts. Not in a big dramatic way. Not like some grand release where everything suddenly feels better. But in the smallest, quietest ways, your shoulders soften. Not because you told them to, but because they're no longer bracing. Your breath gets deeper, not because you forced it, but because nothing's chasing you in your mind anymore. You stop looking for the next thing to fix. You stop scanning the moment for something that might go wrong. And for the first time in a long time, it's quiet. Not numb, not checked out, just still. And that stillness, it doesn't feel like giving up. It feels like finally coming home to yourself. You notice you're not rushing through conversations anymore, trying to sound okay. You're not holding in your feelings just to protect someone else's comfort. You're not trying to be the strong one in rooms where you're secretly falling apart. You're just being, because letting go isn't about walking away from everything. It's about walking away from the version of yourself that believes you have to hold it all, the version of you that performs being fine, just to avoid being misunderstood, the version of you that says yes out of guilt, that smiles through pressure, that absorbs tension like it's your responsibility to fix. But when you start releasing that, when you stop clinging to what you were never meant to carry, you create space for softness, space for grief, space for laughter that doesn't feel like effort, space for silence that doesn't feel awkward, space to rest without earning it. You begin to notice that things start to align, not because you're pushing harder, but because you're finally not in resistance. Letting go doesn't make life perfect, but it makes you available for what's real. It makes you feel again. It lets you receive instead of constantly reaching. Because when you stop holding everything, you finally have the space to hold yourself. And once you stop holding everything, people feel it, even if they don't know what changed. You're not as reactive. You're not rushing to fix the energy in the room. You're not jumping in to smooth things over or carry conversations that feel off. You're just present. And that presence, it's different now. It doesn't need to prove anything. It doesn't need to earn approval or anticipate rejection. It's not layered intention or trying to manage everyone else's comfort. You stop walking into situations already rehearsing how to explain yourself. You stop feeling the need to be on all the time. You stop giving people the version of you they expect, and instead, you give them the version of you that feels real. And the wildest part, that version, the softer one, the slower one, the more honest one, they don't need as much. They're not starving for reassurance. They're not chasing clarity in every conversation. They're not pouring out energy hoping to feel valuable. They're just here, grounded, unfolding, enough. And that changes how life meets you. You begin to attract differently, not because you learned new strategies, but because your energy is no longer leaking through control. You start drawing in people who don't need you to be emotionally bulletproof. You stop over-explaining to people who were never really listening anyway. You stop giving access to people who only know how to take. And you begin to notice how many of your old connections were built on performance, on being the helper, the stabilizer, the one who's always good. But now, you're no longer performing peace. You're living it. And that means some things shift. Some people fall away. Some dynamics get quieter. But what stays, what remains, is real. You're not building relationships out of obligation. You're not overextending to keep the peace. You're not chasing emotional crumbs just to feel seen. You're resting in your own enoughness. And from that place, life feels lighter, not because it changed, but because you did. Letting go gives you back everything you were losing in your attempt to hold it all together. Your peace, your time, your clarity, yourself. And the longer you stay in that space, the more natural it feels. Not effortless, but honest. Not perfect, but sustainable. Because now you're not reaching for relief. You're living in rhythm with it. And then one day, without planning for it, you feel something you haven't felt in a long time. You feel safe, without needing to be in control. Not because your life is finally perfect. Not because everything makes sense. But because you're no longer defining your safety by how much you're doing, fixing, or carrying. You're no longer living on high alert. You're not waiting for something to go wrong so you can be ready to fix it. You're not emotionally flinching at every unknown, every shift, every silence. You're just here, present, available, trusting. And in that trust, effort starts to take on a new shape. It's no longer this constant background pressure, this voice saying, do more, be more, keep it together. It becomes something quieter, something intuitive. You begin to act not because you're trying to keep your world from collapsing, but because you're inspired to move. You start working from energy, not survival. You speak without rehearsing. You rest without guilt. You say no without over-explaining. You say yes without betraying yourself. And slowly, your sense of identity starts to realign. You're no longer the one who's strong because you never break. You're strong because you're no longer afraid to break. You're no longer proud of how much you hold in. You're proud of how much you feel, how deeply you allow yourself to be here, not as a version of yourself that's polished and protected, but as the real one, the breathing one, the one that doesn't need to keep proving she's okay, because letting go doesn't erase the parts of you that needed control. It simply frees them. It lets you meet the moment as you are, not as who you think you should be. It lets you exist without constantly checking whether your energy is too much or not enough or perfectly neutral. It lets you move through life with a kind of lightness that isn't loud. It's steady, solid, quietly powerful. And maybe that's what you've been missing all along. Not more energy, not more strategy, just the space to finally be you without the grip. Because that grip, that effort, that constant pressure to keep it all running, it was never your job. And when you've lived long enough without gripping everything, you begin to see what was never yours to hold in the first place. You look back and realize how many of your choices were rooted in pressure, how many things you said yes to because you were afraid to disappoint, how many roles you stepped into because someone had to be the stable one, and it might as well be you. You notice how many of your boundaries weren't boundaries at all, just quiet forms of control. You weren't protecting your peace. You were managing everyone else's comfort. You weren't expressing your truth. You were trying to say it in a way that wouldn't create conflict. You realize how much of your life has been spent staying ahead of the moment instead of being inside of it, anticipating emotions, preparing explanations, carrying backup plans for feelings that hadn't even arrived yet. And now that you're not doing all of that, something strange starts to happen. Life feels lighter, even the hard days, not because the challenges disappear, but because you're not layering them with guilt, self-blame, or mental overprocessing. You're not asking every moment to prove something about your worth. You're not squeezing meaning out of everything just to feel in control. You just breathe. You meet what's here, and you let it move through you without needing to shape it into something perfect. You feel the sadness without resisting it. You allow the silence without filling it. You trust the slow days without spiraling. And that trust, it becomes a new kind of safety. Not because you know what's next, but because you know you'll stay with yourself no matter what it is. That's the power of letting go. It doesn't just change your pace, it changes your posture, your presence, your relationship with effort. You're no longer tensed up, ready to react. You're no longer proving you're capable by holding the emotional weight of everyone around you. You're no longer defining your worth by how well you manage discomfort. You're just being. And being doesn't take effort. It just takes permission. And once control is no longer the thing keeping you safe, you begin to realize what was hidden underneath it this entire time is space. Space you never allowed yourself to feel. Not because you didn't want to, but because control filled every inch of your mind before you could ever hear what silence had to say. Now, with the noise gone, you hear things differently, not in the world, in you. You begin noticing that your inner voice doesn't yell, it doesn't push, it doesn't panic, it whispers, it waits, it rises in the moments you used to rush past. You begin to feel emotions that aren't wrapped in urgency, joy that isn't chasing approval, sadness that isn't trying to be turned into a breakthrough, stillness that doesn't demand to be productive. You finally have the space to feel things cleanly, without narrative, without labeling, without needing to control where they lead. And in that space, a different kind of clarity starts to form. Not the kind that comes from analyzing everything, not the clarity that's earned by pushing through, the clarity that shows up on its own when you're no longer chasing it. You begin to move differently. You pause more, not because you're uncertain, but because you're not rushing to force certainty. You speak more slowly, not because you're unsure, but because you're not rushing to explain yourself. You listen, really listen, because you're not rehearsing your next line in your head. You don't feel behind anymore. You don't feel like you're running out of time. You don't feel like you need to figure it out by next week to feel okay inside your life. Because now, you're not living according to the weight of what you carry. You're living according to the lightness of what you're willing to release. Letting go isn't passive. It's powerful. It's a conscious decision to stop identifying with struggle and to start trusting the truth that was always there beneath it. You don't need to hold everything to be worthy. You don't need to hold it all to be safe. You don't need to hold it to be you. And maybe that's what this was really about. Not learning how to carry more, but realizing you never had to carry it all to begin with. You don't need to be the strong one all the time. You don't need to have it together every moment. You don't need to keep holding what's breaking you just because it's familiar. Letting go isn't a sign that you're losing control. It's the moment you finally stop abandoning yourself just to hold on to everything else. So if this video felt like an exhale, if even a small part of you softened while listening, comment, "I'm done." No explanation, no overthinking, just those words. Let it be your quiet signal that you're ready to live from something softer. And if you want more like this, more space, more truth, more reminders that you don't have to do it all, subscribe. There's more here, and I'll be here with you, not for the perfection, but for the presence